This is a map of Europe. As you can see, there's plenty of choice when deciding on where you want to live, but some places are better than others. Or are they? To find out, I made this presentation focusing on the main advantages and disadvantages in these 5 popular European countries, and we're starting off with the Netherlands. I lived in the Netherlands for 5 years, specifically in Enschede, a city that not a lot of people know about. And I feel like I'm pretty equipped to talk about this country. Let's start off with the pros. First pro on our list are bikes. Bikes are great. What can I say? It's very safe to bike around since there's bike lanes everywhere. The country is incredibly flat, and I think almost every person in the Netherlands has at least 2 bikes. As someone who had a phobia of riding bikes and decided to study in the Netherlands, after half a year of living there, I gathered enough courage to relearn how to ride a bike, and I felt pretty safe doing that. But your bike will get stolen if it looks really nice and it has a flimsy lock, so beware. The next pro on our list, we have innovation. The Netherlands is very innovative. Innovative? Apparently Dutch people like inventing things. They invented things such as the telescope, microscope, popularized the distribution of orange carrots, and they invented vertical gardening. Even though the Netherlands is not the top most innovative country in the world, you can still see it affecting your everyday life. For example, not that long ago I went to Enschede and I went to Albertheim to get a machine-made cup of coffee. And instead of normal milk in my cappuccino, I had the option to get it with oat milk, which was mind-blowing for me. Because my body does not really go well with cow milk, so I was very surprised and happy to see this option. And so, since Dutch people are such fans of innovation, they're also a big fan of digitalizing a lot of things, like making appointments online or doing your taxes. They also love paying with their debit cards, either at the grocery store or a retail store, and a lot of the time they prefer using self-checkouts. At some point when I was living there, I also made a gym membership, and I was astonished by the fact that in order to get into the gym, you had to scan your finger so it identifies you and you can go do your gym things. So as you can tell, Dutch people love convenience and efficiency. So therefore at the supermarkets you'll also find a lot of pre-made food and pre-cut stuff. Of course, in many countries and supermarkets you're most likely to find some kind of salad bar or pre-made sushi, but I feel like the Netherlands is just on another level. They have a wide selection of salads, noodles, sandwiches, wraps, and you can find those in almost all supermarkets. My favorite salad was this mozzarella tomato salad at Lidl that I took when I was in a rush or just didn't feel like cooking. It also had a lot of different vegetables and pasta, so it was like a nicely balanced meal. I still think about it sometimes. They also had a lot of pre-cut and pre-packaged stuff like this. They had mini potatoes, cut potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, lettuce, mushrooms. It might not be very good for the environment, but it's very convenient, you can't argue with that. Plus I heard some people are trying to develop some kind of eco-friendly packaging that's better for the planet, so that's pretty cool. English. Almost all of the Dutch people living there know how to speak English, and they're pretty good at it. I think while I was living there I met like 2 people that didn't know or didn't really want to speak English. Also, most of their movies in the cinema run in English with Dutch subtitles, except for like animations that are meant for children. Then we have public transport, specifically trains. The train system in the Netherlands is great. It's not perfect because nothing in this life is perfect, but it's still very good. The Netherlands is a relatively small country, especially compared to France or Germany, so it's pretty easy to get around, especially with the train. Almost all of the trains, well, most of the trains have Wi-Fi in them, but what's more helpful is that the train stations actually have Wi-Fi, so you can check where you're going or if the train is cancelled or something. But I have to say that it's not cheap to travel by train. If you want to go from Enschede to Amsterdam, it usually will cost you around 30 euros, just one way. Of course, you can buy some kind of subscriptions to give you a discount or travel free on the weekends, but still it's probably cheaper to go with a car if you have one. Last but not least, the Netherlands is not a big country, but it is a pretty country. Most cities have very beautiful and charming Dutch architecture, and they have canals. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So it's like Venice, but completely not like Venice. Now, let's move on to the cons. Firstly, we have the weather. Well, in general, in the summertime, it can get up to like 30 degrees for a week or 2. And in the winter, in I would say worst case scenario, -5. But other than that, it's kind of cloudy and maybe windy, and there's quite some rain. And the worst part about rain is that you probably need to bike somewhere during that time. And if it's also windy, then it's just a lose-lose situation. And so a lot of Dutch people use some kind of app like this that looks at the trajectory of the rain and the clouds and how it's gonna fall, and so they can calculate when exactly they should go home. But the worst thing about the Dutch weather is that it can be completely unpredictable. One moment it's raining, then it's sunny and there's a rainbow, then it's raining again, and then it's hailing, a tornado pops out of nowhere, and then it starts raining meatballs, so you're completely confused on what's happening right now. Now the next con, we have the Dutch language. Even though you'll still probably be fine without knowing a single word in Dutch if you know English, you'll probably want to learn the language for many reasons. And if you know English, Dutch is considered in the easy category of languages to learn. However, personally, in my opinion, I don't think Dutch is a very pretty language. It's like a mix of German and English, but you also have a potato in your mouth. And you might also run into the problem of not being able to practice Dutch in the Netherlands. Since if they can sense that your Dutch is not that good, they might switch to a language that you're more comfortable in, as they probably know at least 5. So you'll probably have to convince them that you don't know any other language except for your broken Dutch. Housing. Finding some kind of good and affordable accommodation in the Netherlands is difficult. Like a lot of countries, the Netherlands is having a housing crisis. And renting something in Amsterdam could be very expensive even for Dutch people that lived there for their whole life. In short, there's not enough houses and apartments being built to accommodate the country, so there's a high demand and it's not cheap. And I also remember seeing some kind of article where international students came to the country and they didn't have a place to stay yet, so they had to tent outside the university until they find some kind of accommodation. So then, speaking of apartments, no floors in apartments. It's not a regular occurrence, but it does happen sometimes. If you move into a student room or an unfurnished apartment, there is a chance that they just don't have any floors. In that case, you might be lucky and get the floors from the previous tenant, but you also might need to get rid of it the next time you move out. So that's a doozy. I don't really know what a doozy is, but I feel like that's a pretty accurate description of this. And last but not least is Dutch food. Let's start with the positives. They have great cheese and I love to get myself a freshly made stroopwafel. Other than that, their traditional food is a bit boring. They love fried food like croquettes and bitterballen, oliebollen, and they also sometimes love having sprinkles for breakfast. A traditional Dutch lunch consists of a flat, flimsy piece of bread topped with a slice of cheese and folded like this, 4 times. It's a bit underwhelming, what can I say? Other than that, of course, you probably can find whatever you're looking for in the supermarkets or specialty stores. And in general, they have a lot of inspiration from Indonesian food since history happened between them. So that's basically it, and let's move on to Germany. I've lived in Germany for about 1.5 years now, and it feels like a lot of time, but also not that much. So let's move on to the pros. First pro of living in Germany is that this country is big. So you have a lot of choice when it comes to cities to live in and travel. You have the edgy techno Berlin, sophisticated and rich Munich, business casual Frankfurt, and rainy Hamburg, and many more. Germany has a lot of airports and neighboring countries, so there's a lot of things that you can explore. Then Germans love their peace and quiet. That's why on Sundays a lot of shops are closed, you can't throw away glass and you can't really vacuum in your apartment. This definitely can be seen as a negative, but it's also nice to know that there's a day dedicated to just rest and regain energy for the upcoming week. Unless you work in a restaurant or some kind of cafe, then that's a different story. Even though most grocery stores are closed on Sunday, if you live in a big city, then most likely there are some that are open. Healthcare. Germany offers universal healthcare, and it says here, Germany has a high standard of healthcare. I don't think this sentence is correctly made, and I also don't know if I can vouch for that because I don't have much experience with it so far. So in general, it's a good thing. However, what I do know is that getting a doctor is pretty annoying. They have weird opening hours and they usually don't accept new patients. So you'll probably have to make a lot of phone calls to actually get the help you need. Most of the times the doctors do speak English, but nurses might not. Next up, we have cost of living. I feel like Germany is a pretty affordable country to live in and work at. So if you can see this chart, because I'm not too sure how well you actually can see this, it shows the purchasing power that a person has in each country. And Germany is pretty high on the list. 100.2. The purchasing power indicates the ability to buy products and services. So people living in that specific country, how much stuff can they buy with their hard-earned cash, like rent, food, and other expenses. This chart also indicates that the Netherlands is actually higher on the list than Germany, which is a bit confusing because I feel like in the Netherlands the rents are higher and the food is a little bit more expensive. But I suppose it really depends on where you live in Germany, because probably Hamburg or Munich would be pretty pricey. So if you're a digital nomad traveling Europe and saving up some bucks, I guess in general just move to a smaller city to save up on rent. Next, if you love baked goods, you'll love German bakeries. They have a wide variety of cakes, pastries, sandwiches, and hearty bread. It's incredible. Then what is good to know is that Germans and Dutch love being punctual and making appointments. If you had planned to hang out with a German and you're running late and you didn't send a text message saying that you're gonna be late, they'll probably be offended by that. And finally, autobahns. They have autobahns, and Germans do love them. Let's move on to the cons of living in Germany. First things first, we have the train station system. The German train system is very well developed. It goes to many cities and crosses many villages. However, it is not very reliable. Germans are known for being punctual, but for some reasons their trains are not. I saw somewhere statistics saying that 1 in 5 trains is late or cancelled, but in reality, in my experience, almost every other train is late at least 20 minutes. Plus, it seems like every year they're discovering the concept of winter and there's snow on the tracks, and we don't know what to do about it, so we're just gonna cancel the train. Tax deduction. Well, taxes are not bad. That's why Germany has universal healthcare and almost free education, but it can take a big chunk of your paycheck. And this is a bit of a difficult subject because this is not an accurate representation of how much taxes an average person pays in this country. This more shows if you're very rich and earn a lot of money type of taxes. It says here that on average a German pays around 24 or 42% depending on how much income you make. But Germany also has additional taxes like the church tax. If you're religious, specifically probably Catholic, then you'll have to pay this tax to the church. It not only goes to the church, but it also goes to some kind of charities or events. So overall, it's a good cause. But there's also a tax that everybody needs to pay, which is called the radio and TV tax. It doesn't matter if you don't have a TV or a radio, each household has to pay this tax. And it's around 18 euros a month for one household. So it's basically like a set amount that you need to pay. I understand the sentiment, but it's still frustrating. Another con of living in Germany is homelessness. Germany has the highest number of homeless people in Europe, and you can see it in the streets. This is a big issue that Germany is dealing with. There's a lot of beggars and people sleeping on the street, and it might make you feel unsafe. And of course, I don't blame them for being in this terrible situation, but I feel like the country is not doing enough to actually help them. I believe Germany does have some kind of social benefits, but I don't really know how it works. And I don't really have a solution for this, but I hope they'll fix it at some point. I always viewed Germany as being punctual and efficient, but looking at their train system and bureaucracy, I'm not too sure anymore. Getting things done here is a slow process, so it will require a lot of time, appointments, and forms. And doing your taxes on your own in Germany is basically impossible. You either have to hire a tax guy or you can do it through a Finanzamt, but you'll probably need to know German for that. Next up we have unfriendliness. I've read a lot of articles saying that Germans are unfriendly. Well, I think it depends on where you come from. If you come from places like America or Spain, where small talk is encouraged, or where the people are just in general more welcoming, then I suppose if you come to Germany, you'll probably think that Germans are pretty unfriendly. But in general, they respect each other's privacy and personal space, and well, if you're looking into making friends, then it's a bit more difficult since they like sticking to childhood friends. And usually they just mind their own business. Unless you're doing something annoying or you're breaking the rules somehow, like by jaywalking, then you'll probably meet the German stare. To be honest, I didn't know it existed until TikTok, and I didn't experience it myself until I started researching about it, and I went to the grocery store and I witnessed it in real life where a German was staring at another German because they didn't pack their groceries fast enough. No kitchen. It's a common occurrence if you rent an apartment that is unfurnished, you might not have a kitchen there. Which is so annoying.
Why would you not have a kitchen in a rented apartment?
You might get lucky by just buying through the previous tenant. However, it might cost you like at least 1,000 euros. I think this situation is getting better, but this is just ridiculous. Not only do you have to buy a kitchen, but you also have to hire people to install it. So it costs a lot of money. Last but not least, we have the German language. Even though German is placed in a box of easy languages to learn if you know English, German grammar makes it way more difficult. You can probably survive in Germany without knowing German, but in order to make friends and just make your everyday life easier, you would want to learn German. Plus, if you learn German in school, you'll be surprised how different German sounds around the whole country. A lot of the Germans up north have difficulties understanding what the south is talking about. And when it comes to Austria and Switzerland, that's just a completely different language in general. They might understand each other, but they will have to use all their willpower to attentively listen. Anyways, now let's talk about France. A country full of love, croissants, and over-romanticization. And you might be wondering, have I ever lived in France? And the answer is no, but I do have a friend that has been living there for the past 2 or 3 years. So I asked him some questions and here are the answers. So let's start with the pros. Firstly, we have food. France is known for having amazing cuisine, starting from stinky cheeses to macarons, eclairs, and snails and frogs, and much more. French people really value fresh produce and great wine, and they will judge you if you get a baguette from the supermarket, because that's a criminal offense. France is also known for taking it slow. They love having 1 or 2 hour lunch breaks and enjoying their long dinners with family and friends. But that does not mean that they're lazy. When they go to work, they actually do their work pretty productively without any distractions, and then after that they're just enjoying their free time. For this reason, some stores might be closed during lunchtime or not open on Sundays at all. Since France works to live and not the other way around, they also enjoy vacations, and a lot of them. France is a country that is known for their highest number of paid holidays in the world. Depending on your employment, it's from 25 to 35 days of paid time off. Plus, you also have 11 public holidays. So they really know what they're doing. And their school system also enjoys having breaks between school time to enjoy the holidays with their parents. But when it comes to destinations and exploring, France also offers a very diverse terrain. France is also often considered to have one of the best geographies in Europe due to its wide variety of landscapes and geographical features. So they have nice beaches, mountains, rivers, flat surfaces. So basically whatever your little heart desires. However, to get where you need to go, you'll probably need some kind of form of transportation. And if you don't have a car, France offers a lot of public transport. They have buses, they have metros, they have trams, they have trains, and they're pretty accessible and convenient. But if you live in a more rural area, you'll most likely need a car. There might be a bus going from city to city once or twice a day, but in order to get somewhere where you need to go, you'll most likely need a car. It is more reliable than German trains, but if your train is cancelled, good luck getting a refund. I actually forgot to mention that in Germany, if your journey is delayed by 1 or 2 hours, you can actually get a decent refund from 25 to 50%, or even 100%. But it's a bit of a hidden feature, and if you have the app, it's a bit more easier to find. And finally, accommodation. When it comes to finding a place to stay, France has plenty of options. Unless you want to move to Paris, then, well, it's Paris. In addition, France can also offer you assistance when you move from one place to another place. But it depends on the distance and if you have used this service before. But it's kind of cool. Now moving on to the cons. Speaking of homes, even though there's plenty of choice, many of them are old. Although the outside looks charming, the inside is what matters. And the inside might have small rooms, only 1 bathroom, outdated kitchen, bad isolation, noisy floors, and stinky pipes. You can find places that have up-to-date kitchens and other installments, but they're usually further away from the city. And they're not cheap. Next up we have the language barrier. Of course, like any other European countries, if you don't know the language, it's gonna be way more difficult to live in the country. But if you know English, French is also considered to be one of the easiest languages to learn. French and English actually share 30% of their vocabulary. French grammar is not as difficult as German, but it has its own difficulties, like not pronouncing specific letters and words, and nouns having genders, which are pretty random, so you'll just have to memorize them. If you live in the Netherlands, you won't have a problem with speaking English because Dutch people love showing off their English skills. If you live in Germany, you can't survive without knowing the language, especially in the big cities, but in order to feel comfortable in this country, you'll most likely need to learn German to socialize and do other small tasks. But in France, unless you live in Paris, it's gonna be really difficult to exist in this country. I mean, if you're staying there for a couple of months or years, like as an international student, you'll probably be fine. But if you're trying to settle in and find a job and date people, then it's a bit more complicated. What I have gathered from the World Wide Web is that French people are not really keen on speaking English, either because of pride, political reasons, or they just don't feel that comfortable in their language skills, so they would rather speak French. Then France has a culture of saying no. I've seen many content creators that live in France or lived in France talking about this, that the first default answer is no. Either if they want to open a bank account or change their flight, the first answer will be no. So you'll actually have to fight for what you want and convince them to do it your way. This is an interesting phenomenon, and I tried looking for explanations on this on the internet. And so what I found is maybe the first hypothesis is that they have protester blood in their genes, and the first thing they want to say is no, whenever whatever happens. Then secondly, 75% of no's is most likely a I don't know. So I don't know how to help you, or I don't know how to fix this issue. So instead of saying I don't know, they just say no. And lastly, which is bureaucracy, which is also the next slide of this presentation. Bureaucracy in France is complicated. If you want to do A and you need to have B, but in order to get B, you need proof that you applied for A. So basically it's just in conflict with itself. They also don't want to deal with this confusing system and forms, and so if you really persist, they probably will help you. Anyways, moving on to the cost of transportation. We talked about how convenient and how many options are there in France when it comes to public transport, but it can also be quite pricey, especially those high-speed trains. And if you have a car, you also might need to pay a toll for using a road or a bridge, and it can be as high as 30 euros only one way, which is pretty crazy. Next up, we have strikes. Strikes aren't necessarily a bad thing. People need to fight for their rights and what they believe in. Even though France is quite up there when it comes to the quantity of strikes they produced, it doesn't happen that often. But when it does happen, it will most likely affect your life. Either you can't go by train to work, or the roads are blocked off, or the electricity is out, something like that. So that's just a thing that happens. Next up, we have not that many choices when it comes to vegan or vegetarian options. I feel like French people are purists when it comes to food, so this kind of makes sense. Of course, if you live in Paris, it's probably not a big issue. But in any other bigger city, it's not really that common to find vegan or vegetarian alternatives in the supermarket. But I've heard it is getting better, so we just have to wait a couple of years. Last but not least, rudeness. French people are rude. All of them. It's crazy. This is a prominent French stereotype. Yes, there's rude people in France, but there's also rude people everywhere else. Looking on the internet forums, it was quite divided. One forum was saying that French people are rude, and the other one saying that no one is rude in France and everybody's really nice. I think there's a lot of cultural differences, because a lot of the people saying that French people are incredibly rude were also from America, where they enjoy small talk with strangers and expect the service to go above and beyond when serving them. French people might be rude to you if you don't speak French or even try to learn it. And if you don't say bonjour when you enter a bakery, they'll see this as very disrespectful. And in my experience, I have encountered many rude waiters. But to be honest, the gastronomy industry is pretty hectic and they probably just want to give you what you want and leave you alone. So I don't blame them. So now we can talk about Sweden. The only time I've been in Sweden is when I had a layover in Stockholm. But I do have a friend that's been living there for quite a while and she had some knowledge to share with me. So, pros. Nature. Sweden has a lot of nature. But Sweden also has the freedom to roam law, so you can basically camp, hike and swim anywhere you want without landowners' permission. With respectful distance, of course. You can also go and collect berries and mushrooms if you would like to do that. Additionally, Sweden also has a coastline. As you can tell by this map, there's a lot of water around it. So there's a lot of choice when it comes to going to the beach and taking a little dip. However, don't expect the water to be warm, especially outside the summer season. And it's quite shallow and there's a lot of seaweed. So, you know, you have a beach, but is it a good beach? Swedish and English. A lot of Swedes living in Sweden know English pretty well, so that's not going to be a problem. But if you would like to learn Swedish because you've been living there for a while, or you're planning on living there for a while, and you think it's a good idea, which it probably is, I have good news for you, because Swedish is not that difficult to learn. I mean, it's considered to be an easy language to learn if you know English, and the grammar seems to be quite easy. Of course, learning a new language always will have its difficulties, maybe in pronunciation or vocabulary, but in general, it's okay. Holidays and parental leave. Sweden is also pretty generous when it comes to giving out holidays and vacation days. And as an employee, they would get a minimum of 5 weeks of paid vacation. Sweden also has one of the most generous parental leave systems in the world. Parents get 480 days of leave per child, which is a lot of time. In Germany, you get around 3 months, and in the Netherlands, you get around 4 months. Plus, 390 days are paid at a rate of 80% of your salary, which has a limit to 80 euros a day. I did this research, but now I'm confused. I guess that's good. Plus, in July, it might be that the companies are working way slower or just shut down completely. At some point, I was applying for a company in Sweden, and I got an email saying that we have to wait with the candidacy decision making because the whole company will not be working during the July season. Then, what's also great about Sweden is that they have universal free healthcare. So, from my understanding, if you have a social security number in Sweden, then you have the right to have healthcare provided for you. And it is considered to be one of the best in the world, so that's pretty awesome. Then, other than universal free healthcare, they also have free/low-cost education. So if you're Swedish or from the EU, you'll find many universities that are free. But you still have to pay for accommodation and food. And for that, if you're Swedish, you can take a loan of 700 euros that has a very low interest rate. And if you're EU and you would like to have some money, you can also take this loan, but you have to work at least 10 hours a week, I think, in order to be qualified for this loan. And just like in any other European country, if you're non-EU, you'll probably need to pay quite some money to be able to study. Next up. Oh my god, the cons! We're moving on to the cons. First we have cold weather, no sun. Well, firstly, in the summertime it can't get up to 30 degrees, but the rest of the year is pretty mild and cold. It also depends on where you live, because if you live up north, then it's probably cold a lot of the time. Also, in the Scandinavian countries in general, it gets pretty dark. You will get seasonal depression no matter what. And that's something that students from these countries warn international students about. But in order to combat this issue, Sweden adds vitamin D in a lot of products that they consume, like bread, yogurt, and milk. So if you feel sad during the winter seasons, grab yourself a big loaf of bread with some butter and munch on that. And if you're thinking of moving to Sweden, this is a huge factor to consider. The next up we have no urban cities. The biggest city in Sweden is Stockholm, which is also the capital of Sweden. It has a population of 1 million people, and it's pretty spread out. And other than Stockholm, there's not a lot of other big cities. All of the rest are pretty medium. And here's a chart of the population in these cities. So we have Stockholm here, which has 1 million people. Then we have Gothenburg, almost half less. Malmö, even less people. And then you just have, you know, just not a lot of people living in these cities. This is not a completely terrible thing, especially if you like some peace and quiet, but it makes the country a bit less exciting, I suppose. Renting in Sweden is a bit confusing, especially if you just came to the country. Apparently, Sweden operates on a queue system when it comes to housing, so you'll have to get into a virtual line of a city, a company, or a student thing in order to get a place to stay. It can take months, years, or even decades to get a nice place. And when you actually get the place, it's actually reasonably priced. And your second option would be renting a place from a private landlord, where the prices are a bit pricier. Plus, you also have to be quite careful with those contracts, because they can easily scam you. If you don't live in Sweden, this will be kind of confusing at first, but you'll get the hang of it. And so when you're there, get in line as soon as possible to get a nice place. High taxes. In general, Nordic countries are known for having high taxes. That's why they have free education and free healthcare. And in Sweden, it can go up to 53% of your annual income, which is a lot. But this is the case of if you earn 1 million euros a year, which is a lot of money. So actually, an average person in Sweden pays from 20 to 25% of their income. If you like drinking, then you're not in luck, because in Sweden, booze is expensive and it's a bit tricky to get. At some point, Sweden was struggling with alcoholism, so in 1955, they came up with liquor stores, where you can buy liquor. The basic rule is that if something is below 3.5%, you can buy it at a supermarket, so like a beer or light wine, and anything else above 3.5% goes to this liquor store. These stores are actually closed on Sundays and big holidays. But people did get used to this concept and they kind of enjoy it. Because this store is a monopoly, you can go inside and ask for a specific gin, for example from Spain, and they have to provide it for you, buy it and sell it to you. So if you're adventurous with your taste in alcohol, then maybe this is for you. I don't really drink, so I don't really care. So now again, let's talk about healthcare, but now differently. Firstly, if you have some kind of emergency, you need to take care of it quickly, everything will be taken care of, no problem. But if you have some kind of mild or chronic pain, that's a bit more tricky to get diagnosed and get treated for. From my friend's experience, if you have some kind of symptoms, you have to call up a nurse and explain what's going on. And usually if it's not that life-threatening, it's a bit difficult to get them to take it seriously. Then to visit a doctor, you'll need to pay 20 euros. And this is a bit complicated. For example, if you have a problem with your ear, you would like to see an ear doctor. But in order to do that, you first have to go to a general doctor and pay him 20 euros. And then you get a referral to get to see the ear doctor. Also dentists. Dentists are really expensive in Sweden. Until you're 23 years old, it's actually free, which is pretty epic. But after that, it's really expensive. To get simply a checkup, you have to pay 60 euros. And a filler will cost you 150 euros, which is a lot of money. The last point on my list is Swedish people being reserved and introverted. As I said before, a lot of Swedish people do speak English, but they might not want to speak to you. Usually how it goes is they make friends in kindergarten and they think that's enough friends for me, I'll stick to those friends. And so they're not really looking to make new friends or new connections. It's not impossible to make friends in Sweden, but it's significantly more harder. But I think it's a general thing in Europe and adulthood of having difficulty to make friends. If you're a student, you'll definitely have an easier time because you're surrounded by your peers and you're seeing each other every day. But if you're moving to this country as an adult, you'll have to put in quite some work. Swedish people won't go out of their way to talk to you, so you'll need to be the one who makes the moves. And for this, there's even a subreddit on how to make friends in Sweden, which has a step-by-step guide that explains how to make friends in Sweden. Now that we're done with this, we can move on to our last country, Austria. I lived in Austria as an exchange student. Granted, it was for 6 months, and also it was when COVID started. So my main resource for this will be the World Wide Web. And if you're wondering about my outfit, well, when I think of Austrians, I think of old white men for some reason. So that's what I am right now. Let's move on to the first slide, which is that Austria is beautiful. When I lived there, I lived in Dornbirn, which is the complete opposite of where Vienna is. Dornbirn is a small city, but it was surrounded by mountains, so every time I look outside the window, it felt like I was living in some kind of simulation. There were huge mountains and it seemed like you're in a game where they block off the area so that you don't cross it because there's no game to play anymore. Plus, if you love outdoor activities, then Austria has lots to offer, like camping, skiing, mountain climbing, and swimming in icy lakes, and more. And even though the capital of Austria, Vienna, is pretty flat, it is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. So it's definitely worth visiting. Austria is not a big country, and if you like traveling, you're in luck because it's also surrounded by other countries that are worth your while, like Croatia, Italy, Czech Republic, Germany, and way more other things. So if you like traveling, a weekend trip to another country is pretty easy to do. Depending on where you are, you can go by bus, train, or plane. Speaking of public transport, it is punctual and reliable, unlike some countries. But it was a bit tricky to exactly find out what is the price range of traveling by public transport. I found that the single average bus ticket in Vienna is 240. A monthly regional pass in Vienna is 50 euros. A regional pass in other areas of Austria might cost you 150 to 200 euros a year. And if you want to go anywhere, anytime, you might be interested in the 1000 euro ticket a year. Which, if you travel a lot, it's a good deal, but also it's a really big commitment to just pay 1000 euros. Last thing on my list is quality of life. Austria has been ranked multiple times to be the most livable country to live in, and Vienna has been ranked multiple times the best city to live in the world or in Europe. Was it Europe? Probably Europe. In the world? Oh wow. So they are doing something right. They have great public services, low levels of pollution, great healthcare, and education. So that's why they rank high on the list. While Austrians enjoy their careers, they also appreciate the little things in life, like having a home-cooked meal or taking a walk in nature. Now moving on to the cons. First one, it's cold. Apparently winters are really cold in Austria. I mean, it makes sense, they have a lot of mountains, but I was surprised how similar Austria was with Sweden as a whole. To explain in more detail, I was pretty skeptical about this, so I went on a website that compares climates in different countries, and I compared Sweden as a whole country and Austria as a whole country and how their weathers are same or different. And I was pretty surprised to see that Sweden and Austria was pretty similar in weather, even though they're located in completely different locations. In general, Austria was a bit warmer than Sweden. It had more snow/rain during the year, but Austria had a little bit more sunlight than Sweden. However, it also completely depends on where you live, because if you live in the north of Sweden, of course it's going to be colder and darker, so it's not going to be as bad if you live in Vienna. You know, potato potato. Then the next slide, we have cost of living. Austria has one of the highest food prices in Europe, but they also have Lidl and Aldi disguised as Hofer, so you can also find groceries that are not that expensive. When I looked up apartments to rent in Austria, they seem to be reasonably priced, but apparently compared to the salaries the Austrians get, it is not so reasonable anymore. At least that's what I found out, so you can let me know. Jobs, or finding a job. In general, in Europe, if you don't speak the language, it's gonna be way harder to find something. If you're not a senior in your position with a lot of experience, if you don't have a high demanding job like IT or finance, then it's almost impossible. Even in Vienna, typically you can find international jobs in capitals like Amsterdam, Berlin, or Paris, but it just doesn't have anything. Or at least I couldn't really find anything. High taxes. Now this is a tax bracket that I put in here. From 2017, which is kind of not so accurate, Finland is ranked the top tax taker, and Austria is also quite up there. So that's about it. Last thing about Austria. They're unfriendly and it's difficult to settle in. This is based on an article that's written in 2023 that surveyed expats living in different countries on how easy it is to settle in and how friendly are the locals. And Austria was ranked pretty low. Plus I saw a lot of TikToks of people saying that Austrians are unfriendly, but then I looked at the comments and a lot of people say, oh, I've been to Austria and Austrians are super friendly. So, you know, there are friendly people and there are unfriendly people. So it really depends on who you meet and where you meet them, and you know, because it's a new place, and if you don't know German or Austrian German, then it's probably going to be even more difficult. So that's it about Austria, and now we can talk about things I forgot to mention. There are probably more that I forgot, but these are the ones that I remember now. Firstly, I forgot to mention the 49 euro ticket in Germany. It's a great ticket, you can get anywhere you would like in Germany, and it's 49 euros. What a steal. The one disadvantage is that you'll need to take regional trains. So if you want to get from Dortmund to Germany, it would usually take you 3 hours, but with this ticket it'll probably take you 5 to 8 hours, because it's much slower. Then we have Germany Cares. When the prices started to rise and the electricity bills came, everybody was a bit worried, because it's quite expensive now. And to help with the bills, the government planned to give everybody 300 euros to people that live in Germany. But I never did get 300 euros, even though I was employed. And I don't blame the government, I blame the people I was working with. Anyways, talking English. A lot of these countries that I mentioned speak good English. Even Austria. Austria is quite up there when it comes to percentages of people that speak English. In my experience, if you are in a group of Dutch people and you're the only English-speaking one, most likely they'll switch to English to accommodate you and to probably show off their skills. But what I noticed with Germans is that if you're in the same situation, they most likely will just continue speaking German unless you say something or they realize that you don't understand anything. Of course, there are exceptions, but that's the general vibe that I got. And the last but not least thing that I forgot to mention is don't move to the Netherlands. When I made the video if you should move to Germany or the Netherlands, a lot of Dutch people in the comment section said that of course our country is much better, but you should not move to the Netherlands. We don't want more people here. And even though these comments I thought were a bit rude, especially because I was thinking of moving back to the Netherlands, I understand where they're coming from. They just don't have enough housing to support the Dutch people that live in the Netherlands, let alone having other people coming to the country expecting to have a place to stay. They're probably not going to be unwelcoming, and you'll probably manage to find some place to stay or even buy a house or an apartment. But that's just something that was on my mind. Actually, to minimize the amount of international people coming to the Netherlands, they made some kind of law that a specific amount of lessons or courses or programs should be in Dutch, and Dutch should be taught to international students. Which actually would be nice when I studied there, because I had to pay to study Dutch, and it wasn't even that nice of an experience. So folks, what did we learn today? Well, no country is perfect. They all have their goods and their bads, and it all comes down to what you prefer and where you have the opportunity to move to. Plus, until you actually move and live at the specific location, you can't really know if you would like or not like it, because it really depends on the situation, the people you meet, and the things you need to do. So if you have the opportunity to move somewhere that you don't know if you like it or not, why not try it? Or not if you really don't like it. Then it is hard to make friends. Unless you're an international student surrounded by other students, it will be a bit more difficult to make friends. I've read so many articles saying that it's hard to make friends in Denmark, in Belgium, in Finland, in Slovakia. And well, yeah, I guess people like sticking to people from their childhood, from school, from university, and they're just busy doing their own thing. Plus, if you don't know the language and you're a bit introverted, then it's gonna be just harder. Overall, I would just say give it a year to settle in and maybe find some hobbies to do, and you know, it's not impossible to meet new people, it's just a little bit more difficult. Maybe a little bit even more difficult. Finding a job in your career is also not an easy task if you don't know the language, you're not a senior in your position, and you don't want to live in a capital, because that's probably where the most opportunities will be that are international. Or if you're not in a high demanding job. I don't want to discourage you because it's not impossible, but right now we're in a recession, so less companies are hiring, and a lot of companies in general hire internally, so you don't even know that the job is advertised. So yeah, if you're trying to find something and you're not really successful, then you're not alone. Oh, speaking of jobs, I have coffee. You can buy me a coffee now on Hello Erica /Hello Erica, and you can support my video making skills and video thingies that I do on this channel. If you would like to do that, feel free. No pressure. Would be cool though. So I know Europe has more than 5 countries, but these specific countries I had some experience and my friends have some experience living in them, so I thought it was a fun video to kind of put together. So if this video goes well, I might make a part 2 and add a couple more countries to the list. It would be pretty fun. So yeah, that's it for this video, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye! So if you care about my laptop drama, I actually bought 3 laptops, and all of them had some kind of issue. So I had to send them back. First one had a problem starting, the second one I think also had a problem starting but in a different way, and the third one lasted the longest. I had it for a month or longer. It was working flawlessly, but for some unexpected reason it started crashing and lagging my video editing software, just my video editing software. I tried everything to fix it myself. But then I was like, okay, let's just ask the people, maybe they can fix it for me. So I sent it back, they fixed some other issues, and then I said, hey, could you check the hardware? And they were like, oh, I'm not sure, we'll check. A week later, they're like, hey, we can't fix anything, and so we're gonna send you the money back. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I have to find a new laptop.